So be sure you pick one of those up if you have not seen it. We'll move on then to Holly. And Holly Peterson went to Rutgers University for her MLS and has worked in Loudoun County Public Libraries for almost 14 years. Before that, she worked for a public library in Princeton, New Jersey, and Toledo, Ohio. And Holly took a detour into special libraries for several years, working for the American Institute of Architects and Public Technology, and that is associated with local governments. And she has run a book discussion program at Russ Library that's now 7 years old. So she's going to talk to us a little bit about what she does with her seniors and outreach.
Yes, Maria is here, and she is our outreach manager and librarian, and she asked me kindly to work with her on a couple of occasions. So the Russ Library book discussion is probably your typical adult book discussion. There's a variety of ages who come. I do have 2 couples who come, but there aren't many men. So ladies from 30 to 60 to 70, possibly 80 as well. But when we talked about this program, I was asked to talk a little bit more about working with seniors. And I have 2 particular experiences, and both of them I think have some aspects that are interesting and might be useful for you. The one book discussion is at Leisure World in Loudoun County. And the people who attend that discussion come during the time that the outreach services are there delivering their materials. So first there is something of a time constraint. The book discussion at Russ Library can run from an hour to an hour and a half. The time at Leisure World is somewhat shorter, 45 minutes at least when I was there. So that meant the discussion had to be a little more focused. The other thing I was aware of is we had quite a variation in the intensity of readers, I would say. Some were people who were reading rather lightly and were not particularly prepared to discuss the material. And then there were others who had read very deeply and were wanting to have much more significant discussion. So there were sort of 2 audiences to assist or to lead. The time I was there, we did this book, Triangle by Catherine Weber. It is historical fiction. It is set, or the major storyline has to do with the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in New York City. There are 2 storylines. 2 sisters who were working in the factory on that day, their lives, and then a granddaughter's life, and obviously a contemporary story, and how she is then interacting with one of the survivors. What we found, or I should say, the person on Maria's staff, Trish, did a gorgeous PowerPoint that allowed us a different mechanism for providing background information and visual information. There are some wonderful archives with information and photographs from that terrible event. And so Tricia was able to put together a nice introductory program, and because it was multimedia, that really drew the readers in. It gave them a little more information than some of them had. The second storyline in this book has a musical aspect to it. There is a composer of music who is using the DNA sequences of various organisms and creating music based on that. This is a true thing, and you can find the music on the internet, and we were able then, of course, to play some examples, and so that helps reinforce the storyline. So that really, I think, turned out to be a good approach, especially when there is background. Not all stories really allow you to do this, but many do. So the PowerPoint, and then I had another experience that was at the Senior Center in Leesburg, Virginia, and that was sort of a frustrating situation because there were logistical issues that seemed like we could never quite overcome, scheduling being one. The staff there seemed to want us to come, but there was never a time that seemed to fit into the schedule. The seniors were always busy doing something else. So frequently what happened was we had people who wanted to be there. They were there. They hadn't read the book. It didn't seem to matter. And I don't mind that in a discussion, but it was the majority. So, and for some of them, I felt that some of them it was more of a drop-in situation, and I feel that they weren't really going to be able to read the book, come 2 weeks later and remember and be really discussion participants. At that point, I was working with someone else, and the two of us talked it over. What could we do? What could we do? We decided that we would do a short story, and we found a very super short story by John Updike. It's called The A&P. It's about the A&P grocery store. And she and I read it aloud, and we felt this way, number one, we don't have to make copies, we're not in copyright problems. It's going to be immediate, and therefore we don't have the issue of memory and other problems. It was the most lovely discussion, and I encourage anyone else with a similar audience to try it themselves. The story, as I remember it, is set in the 50s. 3 teenage girls come into the A&P wearing their swimsuits, and the whole story is about the reaction of the other people in the store. And the young 18-year-old clerk, who obviously, a young man, is looking, and the older manager who's offended and kind of berates the young women. And the young man ultimately has a grand gesture because he kind of tells his boss off and he quits. And he gets to the sidewalk and the girls are gone, and he can't even kind of take the pleasure of a little reward. But it was lovely because these were all ladies, and they were quite willing to kind of go back to their teenage years and think about times when they might have done something that was a little out of the norm. And we talked about their first 2-piece bathing suits, and of course we know what 2-piece means in the 50s as compared to today. Totally different. So it worked out nicely. I've not had the opportunity to do a program like that again, but I would encourage anybody to give it a try. And there are lots of super short stories out there, but they are available.